בוא אני אתחיל, למרות שאין לנו את המצגת. אנחנו דיברנו במהלך היום לגבי מה שאנחנו עושים עם טכנולוגיות בכיתה. And we're getting these technologies into the classrooms, we're teaching our kids, we're getting all the young adults to learn and experience all these technologies. But the issue is that we want to face, because our university is very unique, especially our schools are graduate schools. So we teach master's and PhD programs, and the concentration is really on the graduate and working professionals. The philosophy is mainly on hybrid model, where we bring the students in. We do either in the executive MBA that Michelle is teaching, or the master or PhD program that I'm teaching in information systems. We bring the students in, we get some sessions on ground, and then they fly or they go and they do the rest online. And so the issue is that we use all these technologies and we bring all these new technologies. Let me just run the slides at this point. And so we bring these technologies in the classroom, and the question is obviously where is it going? Okay, how is this going forward to businesses, especially for business students? And so the title for this work, and this is very initial work, what we're going to present here, is from e-learning courses to businesses, and what technologies do they share? And we're going to concentrate on the issue of sharing. And there are hundreds of technologies being developed daily. New tools, communication tools, presentation tools. I mean, we're all using PowerPoints all the time, but we know that there are better ways of presenting and communicating and sharing information than PowerPoint, also in the classroom and online. And so these are issues we wanted to experiment and look at how these are going beyond the classroom, what we introduce in the classroom. And Michelle is heavily into that. She's using a lot of these technologies in her executive MBA program. And imagine these are 30, 40, 50-year-old managers, middle-level managers in large organizations in the US, specifically in Florida in this case, that they might have some notions about some of these technologies, did they like it or not, but in the classroom, in the executive MBA course, they need to use it, so they have no choice in that regard. So this is what triggers us. The question is, so we looked at the diffusion of innovation theory, which was mentioned before, and I'm going to touch on it quickly because there is a limitation for this theory, and this is what we try to address. Okay, and the limitation of the diffusion of innovation, Rogers, is that the dependent variable, the measure of that diffusion, is really how many people actually adopt the technology. Okay, so if we're going to talk about Facebook, there is a brand new technology called Facebook. So we all know it. How many people are actually using it? They're not looking at other issues that are around it, like security, like privacy, issues where individuals don't necessarily use it, but they will talk about it. They will brag about it, they will mention it, they will show it, but not necessarily use it, which is a very interesting concept. I mean, they will share this technology, they will share it in the business, they will share it with their organizations, but not necessarily adopt it. And this is where we looked at the issue of sharing, and this is what brought us to the area of informing and informing others. We also started to investigate the issue of informing, and I think there was a presentation by Eli Cohen, the guy who mentioned, I'm going to mention his theory in the next slide, but Eli Cohen, he's a professor from California that actually introduced the informing science framework, and his philosophy is that we need to integrate the informing happening in a context of this environment where you have some kind of a task that needs to be done. You have the informing environment, and that can include the context, the organization, the business, and then the delivery system. And that has to do with some kind of electronic information systems or technology via technology. It can happen as a result of a given task that you need to produce, that you will use a certain technology, and you might switch from one system to another in order to be informed about something. Okay, and we're giving here a very interesting example. We wrote it in the paper, and the reason we wrote it is because we have a neighbor who's actually Israeli, lives in Florida. The guy is a very famous face reconstruction surgeon. I mean, very interesting work. He works for University of Miami. He's training new physicians. And we talked about all those issues that they go through and how they use technology to be informed. If they need to do some very unique, very specific procedures, not necessarily they get all the information that they need in order to perform that task. And so if you look at that case as an example of the informing science process, you will see that if we're talking about the client in this case is the surgeon, the physician who's performing the surgeon, and they need to be informed. The delivery system is the electronic medical record system that has some information about the patient that they're going to take care of. It might be the web to grab some medical papers about other surgeries or other or simulation. And of course, the informing environment is the hospital and the healthcare vendors that provide their access to all these tools for them. And so in this case, and of course, you can see some examples of famous face reconstructions. And we keep on introducing new technologies. We keep introducing them in the classroom for our kids. We keep introducing them in classes for our adult learners. And the question is, do they really, beyond just adoption, are they informing others? And in this case, obviously, implementation of Web 2.0 tools in businesses are going on right now. And these are cases that we look at it day to day. In the business school, for example, or in the computer science and information system, my school, where adults come in and we introduce them to e-learning servers, the platforms that we're using. And they start thinking, oh, I can use this in, I have a lot of doctoral students from the military, for example, the US or CIA agents. We were specialized in security. So what they do is they come, we introduce them to Blackboard, we introduce them to some Web 2.0 tools. They go and take those tools. And so the question is, how is the information going on from here, from our classes over to their businesses? And I apologize, the YouTube is not going to work, I think. I'll try. I'll click on it, and I think it's not. This was.
Try another window because he did.
Yeah, it's not going to open. Essentially, what we have in here is a YouTube to a new presentation. It talks about integration of Web 2.0 in higher education. But the video itself is a very short presentation called Animoto. Okay, and I'll show it to you in a minute. I'll show you the name and all that. If you go to animoto.com, I don't know how many here are familiar with that. Okay, if you go there, you can actually get and produce your own 30 seconds free video. That's really unique. Very unique way, and Michelle actually is using it in her MBA courses, where she asked them, instead of producing a PowerPoint, to actually go and produce a 30 seconds Animoto to introduce a concept, a business concept. So you want to sell something, or you want to, if you're going to be a chief information technology and you're going to come to your CEO and promote certain platform or a certain technology or whatever, you got to do what we call the elevator pitch. You know what the elevator pitch is? Where you have 30 seconds from floor 1 to floor 5 to tell your CEO, because you just happen to meet them in the elevator, about something that you want to push for it. And so it's called the elevator pitch. Okay, you got 30 seconds, and you gotta say what you need to say. All your points should be there. And that's exactly what Animoto is all about. Instead of going through a long bullet, boring type of PowerPoint, it gives you a sound, a movie. It flips the slides for you. It creates everything for you. You just upload some slides, you choose the music, and it produces it for you. And there is a way for you to choose there some other options. So she's using all that in her MBA classes. And she's using e-learning platforms. She's using, and I'm using e-learning and Blackboard and other technologies. And obviously, we all use email and discussion boards and things like that. And so the question was, for this exploratory research, was the research questions were involved into to what extent do they use? To what extent did they use these either mature or existing technologies, okay? And to, in terms of a list of technologies, what is the organizational relevance? And we've seen this before in some of the previous presentations, talk about how is it relevant? The kids are even interested in knowing how is the technology relevant for them in the future. So in this case, we asked these managers, how is it relevant for their organization, okay? And then also we asked them about inform. How did you talk, and in here really we separated, did you talk about the technology? Did you mention the technology for your supervisor or for your coworkers? And did you demonstrate that technology? There were 6 technologies we looked at. Obviously email, social networking, e-learning, e-training systems, electronic board, enterprise resource planning. In this case, Michelle is doing SAP and other SAP and other simulations in the class. So they're doing online as part of the course. So they do SAP simulations as part of that class. And then they do also the Animoto and produce it. They can either produce it to YouTube, etc. Methodology, etc. Essentially, this is a 2-phase process, and we're still collecting more data as we go. But we wanted to report some of the initial data that we found. We collected quantitative via survey. We collected qualitative. We did focus groups and type of interviews. And we started with the quantitative and then moved to the qualitative. And in the quantitative, we had 80 responses. But 45 males, 35 females. I'm not going to bore you with the details. The issue is that majority were working full-time in large organizations above, if you can see it in here, above 100 employees. You can, next. And so this graph, I want to brush quickly because we're out of time almost here, but it's very interesting. The issue of use versus organizational relevance. How, in terms of use, how much they were using the technology versus organizational relevance. And traditionally, you can see that most existing technologies, even Web 2.0 technologies, were coming more or less in the process of very similar, the use and the organizational relevance, what the people were saying. But what interesting for us was the social networking sites. The use was very high. The only issue that we have here, we didn't write in the survey properly, and I will mention this because later on we found this out in the qualitative, was the use for personal use or organizational use. And so this actually led us to a very interesting findings at the end. So the social networking, the use was very high, but the organizational relevance was low. ERP, as expected, was higher organizational relevance, but the use was lower. And Web 2.0 was almost equal. Another interesting area, you will see that in terms of use versus in the informing, they talked about and demonstrated. Most of them are as expected. They will have a high use, moderate talk in a ratio, and then the demonstration is lower. what we found interesting, and that's again very unique, is here the area of Web 2.0, where you will see that topped everything else. And this is what it led us to the point that really this is where the informing of bragging to gain social status. So I talk about all these technologies that I've just learned in class to make me look better in class, and so in social status in the organization also. Qualitative, we got some feedback. If you want, we can flash quickly some of the feedback. Some of them said that their organizations are blocking them completely from using social networking sites and all of these sites during work, obviously. Some of these managers told us, I actually went and talked to my supervisor about it. I promoted, I discussed about it in terms of how we can use it for organizational use, etc. And this is what actually led us to this model that we came up with. And really the process for this model should have come in 3 slides, so I'll just run it quickly. If you think about it, there is one side where you're talking about informing others on organizational information communication tools. So these are technologies. So we inform others for organizational purposes. And then we have this side where it says we inform others for personal, on personal technologies. So you can talk about some new features on your personal phone or iPad or whatever you're going to use. In this case, you're talking about organizational platforms. And then there is a connecting area where we see that some of these are connected. And this is where the interesting part comes in. This is what we've learned, is that, briefly, let me show this before, is where we have the point in the middle where informing of others about technologies happened on organizational technologies for personal use. Okay? So you're talking about how to use the organizational technologies for personal use. Yet in here, you can talk about how to use personal technologies for organizational use. And there is a very bold distinction between these two if you think about it. Because when you talk about using organizational technologies for personal use, that's a big kind of no-no, okay? And when you talk about using personal technologies for organizational use, it's supposed to gain you more status if you think about it. So this is what, it's not in the paper, this is an extension, a new extension of the work, obviously, where if you can think about it, if you talk about how we inform and the difference of private task versus organizational task. On the other side, if you talk about the technology, who owns the technology? Is this your personal technology or is this your organizational technology? And if you think about the traditional two sides, if you use personal for private tasks, it's natural. If you're using organizational for organizational tasks, this is natural. The issue is, what happens when you use personal cell phone, for example, or other technologies for organizational tasks? You answer your emails for work on your Blackberries or iPhones in the middle of the night, right? This will be considered as what we call goodwill. You do a favor for your organization, right? Assuming you don't own that organization, right? Otherwise, it's a natural use. But the issue is, what happens when you use your organizational system? If you have a corporate phone or you have a corporate computer, laptop, and you use it for your uploading your daughter's video to YouTube, this will be considered the misuse, right? And so that's the distinction here that we found out throughout all this process of gathering all this information about informing others. So I guess my time is up, and I'm sorry for running so quickly at this later time. Let's see quickly if they were able to unblock us from going into YouTube. 7. Yeah, one more.
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's the remote.
Yep. Let's see if it's working. It's actually YouTube movie produced in Animoto. So let's see if we can get that to work. Come on. And this is produced in seconds. All you do is you upload some of your slides, your own slides, and then the rest is really done by the platform. Okay. Thank